Hi, welcome back to the channel. Today I've got a special guest. So if you want to hear how Sub-Zero came to know Jesus, then stick around. You're going to be delighted to hear John's testimony. So tell me a little bit about how you were raised and what your worldview was.
I was raised by a Muslim father. He was from Turkey, and he wasn't like a practicing Muslim where he would, go to Mecca and do all that stuff. He was very cultural. He really believed in his culture, his country, very patriotic to Turkey, and he believed in Islam. He thought it was, if any religion was right, that was the right one. Because he always would say, there's only one God. And there was my mother, who was a Christian, and she was always, telling me about Jesus and things like that. And I think growing up, I looked at my mother and father, and I looked at them as, two smart people. And if they didn't agree, who knew what was right? So I just kind of went and kind of forged my own path. I, figured I'm smart, I can figure it out. And if my parents don't know what to agree on, who's right and who's wrong? So just kind of led me into a direction of, I'm my own God.
What was the main reason you were not a believer?
I think there were several reasons that I wasn't a believer. I think a lot of it came down to ignorance. Because, you go through school and they really don't teach you about religion. You learn the secular ways. And when I was in, I think Bible school, because I went, up until I was like 11 years old, I got confirmed. I never really listened. I just kind of went along with things, and I thought about sports and girls. That's all I really thought about. So I just kind of went in one ear and out the other. So I think ignorance played a big part of not being a believer. And I think, too, as I got older, anger was part of it. I thought, how could God let evil happen? Someone would die, and I'd get really angry, and my mom would say, pray, and I'd get angry and say, well, why is God letting this happen,
Yeah.
And I think some of it was arrogance. And I thought, people that believed in religion were weak-minded and simple and stupid. That's just the way I thought. And I thought, I'm educated, I'm smart, and I know what I'm doing. My life will be great. And then, as life went on, I started to really enjoy my sin, I guess. And, I think that's why a lot of people don't believe. They enjoy their sin. And I guess the analogy I can give is, when you look at, I was a policeman, so when I look at a policeman and I think of a criminal, you don't see criminals running to the police, they avoid them. And I think when you look at God, you have sin. And people, always tend to believe they're good people if they don't commit murder, but good according to their standards. And that's the way I thought. I was a good person according to my standards. I never murdered anybody. And so I think that, God, a sinner, isn't going to run to God. They're going to run away from God, because they like their sex or their porn or their alcohol, their drugs, or whatever it may be. And I was, fitting into all four of those categories.
Okay, so how did you live your life up until the time you were transformed or born again? What was your life like before you came to know Jesus? Can you give us a snapshot?
Well, I was never really like a big drug addict or alcoholic or anything like that. I experimented with everything, but I think I had probably two vices, and the first was, sex, women, and that's the way it was. I was always womanizing and chasing, and I never was abusive, but it was like, a notch in your belt. How many people could I be with, and things like that. And the other thing I really enjoyed was, I like to drink once in a while, and I would tie one over and hang out. I've tried drugs. Drugs never really appealed to me. I just always had the vision in my mind of, what happens to all these drug addicts with the needles and things like that just really made me nervous. So I was always kind of into my body and wanted to be healthy and take care of myself. And when I did drink, it was like, once every couple of weeks, once every 3 weeks, I would tie one over, but I wouldn't get drunk to the point where, I would start drinking 2 days in a row, 3 days in a row. So I think I basically was a womanizer. I became a male stripper for years. And so I had a lot of things in my life that I wasn't proud of, but I guess it molded who I was and my belief system. And I guess not so much the direction my life was going, but how those experiences would affect how I viewed other people.
Can you give me an example of that?
Of how I viewed other people. I think because of what I did, I was far less judgmental. I always looked at Christians as being very judgmental and hypocritical. Like, for example, there was a guy I worked with, and he was extreme Christian. You know, we would sit there and he would say, "Don't swear." And I was a policeman at the time, and he would get on people for, taking the Lord's name in vain. And I always, did that every now and then. And I just looked at him as like, okay, here we go again, And then one day we found out he was fired because he sexually his wife's sister. So I just saw this hypocrisy with Christianity, and a lot of Christians that would be judgmental and, always, I guess thumping me with the Bible. And I thought to myself, look at you, who are you, It just really bothered me. And I thought it was ugly and condescending and, kind of like, now that I know the Bible, kind of like the Pharisees in the Bible,
Okay. So, a lot of people on my YouTube channel have heard my testimony, and our testimonies are actually deeply connected, and they've heard what happened on my end, but they haven't heard your experience of what we went through together. So I had the problem with the demons, and then you saw a lot of things and experienced a lot of things, and I want to know your journey of how you came to like changing your point of view about Christians and about Jesus and about the spiritual realm. Can you take us on the journey of what you saw and the changes that were happening in your heart?
Yeah. Well, so we got married in 2001. We met in 2001. We got married in 2003. So 2009 is when all this went down. So we were together a pretty long time at this point. Okay. And, living downtown, enjoying our lives. And, a lot of my friends would say, how could you go out with a stripper? And for example, that's, what you were doing at the time. And I was very accepting of it because that's what I did. So I just thought it was kind of funny in hindsight when I look at it. And I think, well, God brought us together. You were looking for someone that completely fit the person I wanted. And I was looking for someone and you completely fit that person. So it was just, when you look at both our backgrounds and how they came together, I think it was kind of a miracle of itself. But, we had a great life. You were making good money. I was making good money, and we were living downtown in a beautiful condo. And then as time went on, there was a guy I worked with by the name of Craig. And Craig was a friend of mine. I got along really well with him at work because we had a lot of the same beliefs, a lot of the same morals and goal systems. And Craig was really into working out. He played football at Michigan State, and his wife Beth and us, we used to go out. So it was a really good dynamic, a good relationship. And it started all when one day Craig wasn't looking too good, and he just had 2 twin girls. So it was about 3 months into the birth that, I noticed Craig was starting to look a little, haggard. And I said to him one day, I said, "Hey, Craig, you don't look good. Are you all right? Your eyes are kind of gray underneath. Your face is sunken. Are you sleeping enough? What's going on?" He said, "John, it's just the kids. I'm just tired, and I'm getting this pain in my neck and my arm, and I'm probably going to go get it worked on." I said, "In your neck and your arm?" And he goes, "Yeah, and a little bit in my chest." And he mentioned it was no big deal because one of the other persons we worked with was what's called a naturopath, and told him, "Oh, you just have heartburn and you're nervous, you're just had 2 babies." And I said, you probably should go get that looked at. That's kind of concerning. And he just wrote it off. And at the time I had just finished filming a movie. Actually, it was a year earlier, but it had come out. It was The Dark Knight. And I did a couple acting parts in there, but I had a pretty good stunt role in it. And the film ended up doing really well. And I was invited out to the Screen Actors Guild for the stunt awards because our crew had won a stunt award for it. And ended up going out there with a few friends of mine. And after I left, I noticed right when I got there, I was with my friend driving down the road, and I got a call, and it was from one of the guys I work with. And I thought, man, Dwayne's calling me. Why is he calling me? He knows I'm not home, and he wouldn't really do this. It must be important. So I answered the phone and said, "Hey, what's going on?" And he said, "Hey, man, I know you're on vacation, but I just thought you might want to know Craig died." And I was just kind of floored. And I thought, Craig was only 43 years old. I mean, how could this guy die? You know, he was healthy, he was young, and, you know, just had 2 babies. And so he said he had a massive heart attack and just fell over dead. And so, you know, I was just shocked. I was taken so back by it, it kind of ruined the whole trip. But I remember shortly after there, I called you because I knew you would want to know. You knew Craig, you knew Beth, his wife. And I just knew after I told you, I could tell you were really bothered by it. And so, you know, next day went on, I called you again and to see how you're doing, and I just knew you weren't doing good. And I said, hey, you know, if you want me to come home, I can tell that you're bothered. And you said, no, I'm okay, but I'm going to stay by Mom's house. I just don't feel comfortable staying alone. And then that was it. And I just thought, oh, she just wants to be around people. She's sad. And so I just, you know, remained on the trip. And so I got there on a Thursday. So now we fast forward to Sunday, and I'm coming home. So I take a 4-hour flight home. It's about, you know, 10 at night. It's a Sunday night, and I got to work the next day. And I take the train down from the airport, so that's another, you know, 40 minutes. So there's 4 hours and 40 minutes after I get my bags. And then I got to drive all the way out to Bartlett to go get you at your mom's house, which is 45 minutes. So I'm pretty tired at this point. But when I came home to the condo to get, you know, my stuff, drop it off, and get in the car to go get you, I noticed when I walked in, it was cold. It was mid-May, and I noticed, you know, we had some cold weather, but it didn't seem like it was cold to the point that our apartment would feel like 50 degrees in it. And we lived in as you know, that unit with floor-to-ceiling windows. We had about 15 of them. We were on a corner unit, so it was windows all the way around. But we had lived there by, you know, 6 years at this point. So it wasn't like anything new to me. I shouldn't feel uncomfortable or weird like anyone's looking at me. But the minute I walked into the condo, I felt like there was 1,000 eyes on me. Like, it was just creepy. I could feel like, you know, someone was watching me. It was just a really weird experience. And I just put my stuff down and I looked around, and there weren't many lights on because it's like 11:30 at night at this point on a Sunday, and most people are going to work. And I looked at the heat, and the heat was on, but it just wasn't kicking on. So I turned it, you know, up, and it finally turned on. I walked over to the refrigerator because I was really hungry, and I opened the door. And right when I opened the door, I felt like there was a presence in the room with me. And I felt like it was on the other side of the refrigerator door because I could look down at my arm, and my arm could see whatever was behind the door, but I couldn't because my head was into the refrigerator looking at the side of the door. And I looked at my arm, and all the hair on this part of my arm was standing up. And it was like my arm was seeing something. It was so bizarre, I can't explain it. And then I slowly closed the door, and there was this dark figure standing there. And it was like 6.5, 7 feet tall. It was just giant. And it was a head with just kind of like, you could see where the eyes were, you could see where the mouth was, but it was kind of like a blank face. And it went into this huge set of shoulders and slowly came down to a waist, almost like it had a black, you know, suit coat on. And then as it went down, it faded out. And all of a sudden, when I looked at this thing, it hit me and came into me and took my breath away. And I couldn't move. And I watched all the hair on my arms stood up on end. And I was literally frozen solid. And I couldn't believe what was going on. And this happened for probably about a good solid 3 seconds. I was bracing myself. And then all of a sudden, I felt it leave. Literally, physically, I felt it leave my body. And right away, from being a policeman, my rational thought took over. And just, you know, I'm a smart guy. You didn't see what you just saw. You're just exaggerating. You're tired. It was nothing. And I just kind of went back to what I was doing. I just wrote it off as nothing. And so when I got in my car to go pick you up and did the long drive, and I got to the house, your mom answered the door, and I could hear this like weird like yelling and screaming in the background. And now it's like 12:30 at night. And I'm like, wow, who's up, you know? And then all of a sudden I started going, wow, that sounds like Julia. And then I walked into the room, and I was just shocked at how messed up you were. Your eyes were swollen. They were like just extremely bloodshot and glassy and just darting all over the place. And I go, what the heck is going on? And I pulled your mom aside because you were just completely out of it. You just were sitting there running around the downstairs talking to your dad, just complete gibberish and saying kind of weird stuff, you know. And I said to your mom, I said, what's going on here? And your mom says to me, she's got demons. And I just kind of laughed. I go, what? What are you talking about? She's got demons. And she says, she's got demons. I've seen this before. I know what this looks like. And we've already called the church and blah, 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 blah. And I just looked at her and I said, this is insane. I don't believe that. I don't believe in any of that. She's obviously psychologically messed up. What do you mean demons? And so this went back and forth for a while. And I just decided, okay, I'm just going to leave you with mom, and I'm going to go back because I have to work the next day, and I don't know what to do. And your mom said, that's fine. She can stay here. So I went to work, and I worked the whole day, and then I called on the phone, and I went out to visit again, and you were the same way, and you were saying all these crazy things like Bible verses and biblical things like Leviathan and all these like water creatures later on I found out. And I just thought it was so bizarre. And then you would come in and out of, a little bit of you, and then all of a sudden this complete, out of control person. And it was just really, really wearing on me.
Can I stop and ask you, when you saw me going in and out, because I don't remember a half of it. Sometimes I just would remember. What did that look like going in and out? Would Julia come back straight, regular Julia?
No, but there were glimpses of it where I could see it was you, and then I'd have this hope, and all of a sudden it would just get ripped away from me. It was almost like Satan was just going, I remember this? Oh no, and pulling it away from me,
Wow.
Because we had such a great relationship at the time, and that's what I was remembering, and I'm like, who is this person in front of me? This isn't my wife, this is something else.
Okay.
And I was really just, completely floored by it all, And so, this went on for days, and I would go back and forth, and by this time I haven't slept. I'm just no sleep at all, and I'm starting to get depressed myself. So about 2 weeks into it, I said to your mom, I said, I'll take her home and we'll see how this works out, blah, blah, blah. And so we came home, and I remember that night, you were gibberish all the way up to the time we went to bed. You were always fidgety in bed. I couldn't sleep again. I'm like, oh man. And I just remember laying in bed that night, and I just couldn't sleep, and I would doze in and out of, consciousness. And I remember I had rolled over, and I was like dozing in and out of consciousness, and I opened my eyes, and your face was like right here, and your eyes are wide open. You were looking at me, and you go, I just hate you. And I just went, okay. I go, what does that mean? I'm thinking, okay, now I'm going to get stabbed in the middle of the night, or something bizarre is going to happen. But at that moment, when I saw your eyes, it was like you were checked out. You weren't there. And I just said, wow, she's completely lost her mind. And this feeling of dread came over me at that point. I was completely just depressed. I had this feeling of doom. And I could just feel this weight on me, just pressing on my chest, pressing on my shoulders. And I just got up and I went into the kitchen. I remember looking out the window and just in a daze, not knowing what was going to become of my life.
Did you even for a second think that I had demons when you saw that you thought I was just mentally?
I just thought
insane.
You were mentally screwed up because I didn't believe in any of that. Okay. I was completely a non-believer.
Okay.
I wasn't a complete atheist because I don't believe nothing could create something. I knew there was something out there, but I just thought religion. There's so many of them. I thought they were all full of BS,
Okay.
And I thought that, just my mom and dad couldn't agree, but, that's the way it was. And so I didn't really believe in any of that. I always just believed in the science. I believed a psychiatrist was needed and so forth.
So getting back to the testimony, so I'm doing this weird stuff in the middle of the night. Can you pick up what happens? You're looking out the window. You're going, oh my gosh, what is going to come of my life?
Yeah, and I just started getting really, really depressed. And I remember I had to go into work, and I was going to work, and I'm thinking, can I leave her alone? Is she going to just smash the whole apartment up? What's going to happen when I come back? And I remember I came back, and you were in the mirror, and you were doing your makeup in the room like you always did. And I said, oh, good, looks like she's doing something normal that she would do, when she gets up. And I said, hey, hon, how are you? And you just turned to me and looked at me from the side of your eye and gave me that side eye, and you go, fine, leave me alone. And I just went, okay, we're back to square one. And I'm thinking to myself, okay, I got to do something here. This is just not going to work. So I took you back out to your mom's and had you stay there a couple of days, and I contemplated, what am I going to do here? This is probably 4 weeks at this point. I was just tired, exhausted, depressed, didn't know what to do. So I went to pick you up and I just decided, actually, I think it was like a Saturday. And I said, I talked to your mom and I decided I was going to commit you because I just knew that there was no other way around this. You were definitely bonkers and something needed to be done. And I didn't believe in the demons thing. And your mom kept telling me, no, it's demons. She needs a preacher. And I kept arguing with her wholeheartedly against it. And I finally said, you know what? I'm going to commit her. We're not finding a pastor. I'm going to commit her. And she said, well, it's your wife and you got to do what you want, but you're never going to be able to do it. How are you going to get her around this? How are you going to take her to the hospital? She'll never agree to it. I said, we can trick her into it. And she said, what do you mean trick her? I said, why don't we tell her we're going to go to her favorite restaurant, which is Dino's. And Dino's is in the same direction as the hospital. It's right near it. It's literally about a mile away. And once we get past Dino's, we'll figure it out, right? And so as we're driving to Dino's, which you agreed to go, and we're going along the road, and we're about halfway there, and you're just chatting away with your mom, and you're in back, and I'm in the front with your dad, and all of a sudden, out of the blue, you stopped and you just said, "Stop the car and let me out." And I said, "What do you mean?" And you said, "They just told me that you're taking me to the hospital and you're going to commit me. Stop the car and let me the F out." And I said, "I don't know what you're talking about." And I looked at your dad and he went like this, and your mom did the same thing. And I said, "I don't know what you're talking about, but we're going to Dino's. I told you that." So I start speeding up, and you're trying to get the door open, and your mom's fighting with you, and you're struggling to rip the door open. And now I'm getting even more nervous. I go, man, I got to step on it. So I gun it, and I'm just cruising down the road, watching you, trying to watch my driving. And next thing I know, I come to a light, and as I'm coasting, you get the door open. And you roll out of the door, and I look in my rearview mirror, and now there's a policeman behind me pulling me over because I was going so fast. So here you are, rolling out of the car, running away from me. I get out, your dad gets out, and we're chasing you, and the policeman gets out with his gun, drawing down on us and telling us to get on the ground because he doesn't know what's going on. So here I am thinking, oh my gosh, and I'm near the town where I used to work, which is even crazier, I'm thinking, gosh, can the guys I worked with hear me on the radio, my name being announced? So it was a really bad situation. So the police came, I told the policeman, once they got you on the ground, and I said, listen, I'm her husband, I'm taking her to the hospital, she doesn't want to go, I need to commit her. So they called an ambulance, and the ambulance gets there, and they load you in there, and I'm talking to the policeman and your mom and dad, and I hear this screaming, and I look in the ambulance, and there's 3 policemen. Each one's got an arm, and they're cranking it behind your back, and one's got your head. He's trying to push you down. And I said, hey, man, take it easy. You're going to hurt her. She's little. And he turned to me and said, I don't know what you mean by little, but she's super strong. We can't even hold her down, which isn't like you. And at that point, I was like, I just looked in at the ambulance, and I can remember it as clear as day. I was just completely taken back. And I said, wow, what is going on? It just really was, it was disturbing. And then I looked at your dad, and I was crying at this point. And your dad, actually, I saw affection for the first time. He put his arm on me. He said, don't worry, John, it's going to be okay. It's going to be okay. And your mom said the same thing, and we hugged. And you went in the ambulance, and I followed her to the hospital. And when we got to the hospital, I just remember when you got taken in there, you were just bonkers, screaming and screaming. And then finally they sedated you. And the nurse said, all right, tell me what happened. What's going on here? And your mom blurts out, my daughter has demons. And the nurse right away steps back and says, what? And I looked at the nurse and I said, ma'am, just talk to me. Don't listen to her. I said, let's go over here. And she said, yeah, I want to talk to you. And she goes, what is going on? What's this demons garbage? I said, I agree. I said, but my wife has lost it and she needs psychological help. Mm-hmm. And she said, okay, so I'll call in the psychiatrist and he can come and discuss things with you. So he came in and we talked about what went on. And he said, well, the only thing I can foresee is that she needs to be committed because she's obviously completely out of control. If, she's sedated and who knows what'll happen when she wakes up, but you got to approve this. And I said, yeah, sure. And your mom and dad were in agreement and I signed the papers and off you went in another ambulance about a block over to the psychiatric ward. And I remember following the ambulance in and you were in the back completely out. And it was such a cold place. There were no windows on the first 2 floors. It was just all the way around concrete. And I'm in this concrete intake area. And they wheeled you out and you were just out of it. And I just remember them going inside and this door just going and slamming shut. And I just remember looking at that door going, oh, my life is completely changed. It's completely changed. It's completely in chaos. And I just didn't know what to expect. And I remember the next day, I got on the phone and I was calling the psych ward, and I want to know what was going on with you. And I got transferred to the area where you were, and the nurse answered the phone, and I believe her name was Nancy. And I just said, hey, I'm calling about my wife, Julia, blah, blah, blah. And she goes, oh, yeah, she's here. And I said, how is she? She goes, well, I can't tell you. And I said, what do you mean you can't tell me? And she says, well, there's HIPAA laws when it comes to behavioral health. I can't tell you anything unless I have a waiver giving you, authority over her medical, or you have some kind of power of attorney. Do you have that? And I said, no, I don't. I said, first of all, it's my wife. I'm the one who committed it. What do you mean you can't tell me anything? I signed the paper. Look at it. She goes, it doesn't matter. You can't talk to her. You can't learn anything about her health unless you have clearance. I said, this doesn't make any sense. I said, so what am I supposed to do? And she goes, well, hopefully she signs a paper, but if she doesn't, I don't know what to tell you. And I said, well, is it looking like, if she's going to be fine and she could sign it? And she goes, I'll tell you this, and I could get in trouble for this. She goes, she's not good, and she's completely sedated, and we keep sedating her because every time she comes out of it, she's completely out of control. And so I just sat there and I said, oh my gosh, I can't believe this. So now I have to go back to work, try to work at this point. My mind is completely gone. By the third day, I can see my clients are, John, what's going on? You just seem out of it lately. And I'm trying to hide it as best as I can, And meanwhile, I call this lady, and, the third or fourth day, of her saying, she's still messed up. She hasn't signed anything. She's heavily sedated. And so about fifth day comes by, I call, and she tells me the same thing, she's heavily sedated. She goes, John, at this point, I don't know what's going to happen, but you need to probably get an attorney. So I called a friend of mine who was living in our building at that time, and he was an attorney in Chicago, but he didn't handle behavioral health. He handled or nursing, but he was a nursing home attorney. And I thought, oh, it's kind of the same thing, behavioral health, nursing home. And I talked to him, and he said, John, she's right. He said, you got to try to get her to sign that paper, but who knows if she's completely out of it, if she's going to do that. But I'll just tell you, it's really expensive. It'll take about a month from now to get that all done. By the time you go to court, you show everything, physicians' reports and so forth. So I don't know what to tell you, but I'll give you the attorney's name. So I call the attorney, and it's a $15,000 retainer fee to do this. So I was right away just discouraged, and I'm thinking, okay, not only do I pay this amount of money, but I have to wait at least a month. What's going to happen in a month to you? A lot could happen. Then they're going to do whatever they want to you. I have no say in your medical. So I was really, really bothered. And so about the sixth or seventh day, I call, and this lady tells me the same thing. She goes, John, I'm trying to get her to sign it, but she's just completely out of it, In fact, last night she had a really bad episode. I don't want to tell you about it, but, it's not looking good. She's kind of getting worse. And I'm beside myself. I'm just, completely demoralized. And that night I'm, sitting on the couch, kind of zoning out, watching TV. And I got really depressed. And I just, I got on my hands and knees, and I kind of looked up and I said, God, if you're real and you're out there, I need help. I can't handle this. This is just, please give me my wife back. Please give me my life back. I don't know what to do. And instantly, I got this warm feeling that came over me. And I can't say like, oh, Jesus appeared to me, but I knew in my spirit, in my heart, in my soul, everything would be okay. Because I felt like a presence was with me, calming me. And I can't really describe it any other way, but that was the first night I went to bed and I slept completely peacefully. I had a great night's sleep, and I woke up in the morning, I'm like, wow, I just slept. I was exhausted, so I just conked out. And I did my morning shift, and about 10 o'clock, I got up and I called the facility, just waiting for the same answer, she's bad, blah, blah. And as soon as this Nancy answered the phone, I told her, I said, Nancy, it's John. I said, how are you? How's things? And she goes, John, oh my gosh, I got such good news for you. I don't know what happened overnight, but Julia's like totally fine. She's up, she's moving about, she's totally normal. She signed the paperwork. You can come in and you can talk to her. You can tell us what you want, and everything's been worked out. And I hung up the phone and I just was in disbelief over it, completely writing off what happened the night before, and just thinking, oh my God, I got to get to the psych ward. And I went there, and I could tell you were still healing a little bit. You still weren't quite yourself. You just were still really gibberish, but you were pretty much yourself, because you started talking about, I'm not wearing any makeup. I can't believe I'm eating crackers. We were laughing a little bit because that was our little running joke that if I ever knew when you were crazy that if you didn't work out, you weren't wearing makeup, and you were eating gluten, something was wrong. And that you had all three of those at that time. So it was a pretty funny moment in the whole thing. And then you came home, and everything, somewhat went back to normal. I left out a part that I thought was really important, because many of you are probably wondering, what did the doctor say was wrong with Julia? And when I went to pick her up, I did speak with him, and I asked him, Doc, she was saying some pretty crazy stuff, talking about demons and spirits and things like that. What is wrong with her? Does she have like some kind of spiritual thing going on here? And he said, no, not at all. What your wife had is we call acute dissociative disorder. And I said, well, what does that mean? And he said, well, sometimes people just lose touch with reality. And I just thought that was really bizarre, that people can just lose touch with reality. So he said he needed to hold on to her for a couple more days till they wean her off the medication, and then she could come home. And I was like totally happy and ecstatic. But later that night I went home, and I just, curiosity got the cat, and I started to research acute dissociative disorder. And one thing led to another, and I ended up on the Vatican's website. And it was one of their psychiatrists who was speaking on this very topic. And he mentioned that the secular world of psychiatry doesn't believe in demonic possession. So when someone presents with something like that, they call it acute dissociative disorder, which, again, really kind of took me back, wondering, okay, what do I got here? What is going on? So again, it threw another wrench in my train of thought, and it kind of spooked me a little. But again, I just wrote it off and just went on with my life. As time went on, you were reading the Bible more, and I heard what happened to you, and how you had turned to the Bible for relief after you found out, about Craig, and all those verses you turned to, and it was just, really God calling out to you, and you decided you wanted to be a Christian, and it kind of took me back at that point. I was like, what do you mean you want to be a Christian? And what does that mean, And I said, does that mean you're going to be going to church all the time and, running around praying and doing all this stuff? You go, I don't know what it means, but I've been spitting in God's face by dancing. I believe in God, but I just completely was a sinner and moved away. And what happened to me made me realize that, I need to go back to where my roots are, and that's Christ. And now I'm sitting there, okay, I just got over this whole ordeal, and now I got to deal with this. And so here I went from this guy that had a great relationship. We had fun. We'd go out and party and do whatever. And now I have a psychological issue that my wife went through, ruined, how many, months or years of my life. And now I got all these astronomical medical bills because I found out my insurance doesn't cover behavioral health. And I'm even more depressed again. So I'm like, I can't win here. And then you looked at me, and you could tell, I think, that I wasn't obviously going for that. And you said, listen, I understand if that's not what you want, but if you want to leave, I understand too, and you can do what you got to do. And I was just like, okay. And I walked into the other room, and I thought about it for a minute, and thought, man, what am I going to do here? What's my life going to be now? It just made me realize how your life can go from 110% to zero in just a drop of a hat, and like that. And I just decided, you know what? I love you, and I'm going to try and make it work. So I came back out in the room, as you remember, and I said, I didn't buy or marry into this whole Jesus thing. It's not what I want, but if that's what you're gonna do, I'll accept it, but I'm going to read the Bible and I'm going to prove to you your Jesus is wrong. And so I attacked the Bible and I read it like, a policeman would read it. I looked at what the people were saying in there. Could it be corroborated? Were they reliable documents? Do we have reliable documents? I went through the whole gamut. I looked at the geography. I looked at everything, and I was just kind of shocked how there's so many things that were kept from us. I realized, there's 6,000 manuscripts of the original Bible, but yet we don't learn about that in school. We learn about Socrates and Aristotle, and there's only 5 original manuscripts, but yet all these intellectuals lift up all these people and no one discusses Jesus. And I just started to realize, I think the thing that really kind of set in was I started to see the truth in everything. And I started to get angry because I started to think, gosh, why wasn't I taught any of this in school? And it really started to bother me because I always looked at myself as not a cynic. I always looked at myself as a skeptic. And I didn't find an excuse for things. I did in the beginning, because I didn't want to believe in it. And so I guess you could say I was a cynic because I looked for all the excuses that went against God and religion. But when I wanted to prove to you that God didn't exist, I became more of a skeptic because I was searching for the truth. And so when I read the Bible and all this truth started coming out, and not only from the Bible itself, but I realized the main thing I had was the Bible was changed over the years and all this and that. But I realized, how do you change 6,000 original manuscripts to make them look like they weren't changed? Then take all the interpretations of those and change those, along with all the people that ever had writings on all those manuscripts. It's too much work. It can't be done. So it ruled all that stuff out. So I started to see the truth in everything. So it really started to ring true to me. And at one point, there's a fine line. It's not like no one ever believes 100%, I don't think. I think there's a lot of us that believe about 99%, unless you've had a supernatural experience where literally you're confronted with Jesus in a vision, a dream, or in a near-death experience. But people on earth, you only have what you can go on, and you have to rely on the old term faith. You got to take that leap of faith. And that doesn't mean that you blindly follow something. For me, I didn't blindly follow it. I really researched it. So was I 110% sure that religion and Jesus existed? I wasn't 110% sure, but I had to take what was in front of me. And the one thing I knew for sure was that there was a higher power, and the evidence behind the Bible, behind the actions of all the players, made more sense to me than any world religion, any science-based thing at all, because there was so much proof to Christianity. And I looked at Islam too, because my dad was Muslim. I started to explore all of them, and it would just, none of it fit. You look at Corinthians and some of those books, they were written when, eyewitnesses were there. So I think that's when I just decided, hey, I'm going to become a Christian.
So did, as I was changing, what were you seeing? As I was reading the Bible, as I was getting deliverance, as I was getting healed, what was your experience of our marriage?
I just noticed that, first of all, your whole thing about quitting, work and you wanting to pursue God. And I was like, oh my gosh, we got all these bills, we're going to lose all that income. So that really made me nervous. And I thought as time went on, I could see, the changes, of you became more patient, more loving, more accepting, and, just being curious and reading. And I'm thinking, okay, well, she's not being one of those Christians I thought that I knew, the judgmental hypocrites, which I couldn't stand. And you were becoming a real person, someone true to yourself, true to God, and you weren't being judgmental. And I remember sometimes I would have judgmental thoughts, and you would tell me, you can't be like that, don't say that. God loves everyone. And I just sat there and I go, God loves this guy too? Look at how ugly this guy is. Look at what a criminal he is. And you'd always tell me that. And I thought, wow, she's not like all these other Christians, these judgmental people,
So would you say that your faith is based on logic and reason, or feelings and experience, or what would you say is the backbone of your faith?
The backbone of my faith, I feel, is I feel it's built on reason and logic and research. I mean, I researched the heck out of it. My degree's in, science, and I believe in science. I don't write science off. I look at science and God as one.
Mm-hmm.
I look at it the same way I look at God and science is the way I look at lawyers, right? Lawyers, there's a law, and lawyers interpret the law. Just like God is the law, he creates the law, moral law, he creates the physical law, and all we are as human beings is interpreting what God's created. And that's the way I saw it after I became a believer, is I didn't think that man was God anymore, and we were in charge of our own destiny. I believe God was in charge, and all we do is find and discover what God's created. And if you look at time as it's gone on, it's how you could see DNA and not believe there's a God, and how finely tuned we are, how finely tuned the universe is, that it just happened for no reason, no chance, and no guidance. It just made no sense. So my standard and my foundation has always been science-based. It hasn't been, blind faith, so to speak.
Yeah. I have to say, one of the things that I loved about you from the very beginning is that you have always loved truth, and your word has always been your honor, and
Mm-hmm.
your integrity has been so high.
Mm-hmm.
So I remember you told me when you read the Bible, you said, I read this and I believe it's true.
Mm-hmm.
And you said, if I believe this is true, I can no longer live for a lie.
Yeah, right.
And I love that, because your faith became your own faith. It
Mm-hmm.
wasn't just like me pushing it on you.
Right.
And I remember my experience of, I wanted you to believe so bad. I didn't want to go on this journey of
Mm-hmm.
faith by myself. I was still struggling with so many emotional issues. And, but it was more beautiful when it circled back around from your genuine interest and not me pushing you into it. The Holy Spirit drew you.
No, absolutely. And what's kind of crazy is I believe in, at that point I had already experienced so many miracles, and I just wrote them off as coincidence because I didn't believe. That's a coincidence. That's a coincidence. Just like when I got that warm feeling, that's a coincidence, And as time went on and this all ended, and I was talking to one of my clients, and he had been a good client of mine for years. I kind of looked at him like my second father. And I had all these medical bills, and when I got them, I was astounded. I was like, how could, 3-4 weeks in an institution be this high? This is crazy, So when we were at the doctor, I just remember what my bills were, and I approached him. I said, hey, doc, I said, I just found out I don't have behavioral health insurance. It's not part of my plan, I'm looking at these bills and I'm kind of floored. Is there any kind of discount I get? I cannot afford this. I don't know what to do. I'll be paying for this for forever, And he said, let me see what I can do. And then when we came back, and I talked to him at the end of the appointment, I said, did you find anything out? And he said, John, I did. And he said, I'm allowed 2 hardship cases a year. And I said, well, what's that mean? He says, I can write off people's bills. And he says, I'm going to make you one of those hardship cases. And I looked at him and I said, so what does that mean? What do I owe? And he says, you don't owe anything. And man, I was like so happy to hear that. So right off the bat, I had gotten rid of all those bills. And the only bill I had left was a certain copayment I had from the emergency room and the ambulance fee to drive, because the ambulance fee is covered by our taxes going from the scene where you had jumped out of the car to the hospital. But the ambulance to go from one end of the hospital to the other was like $3,800. It was ridiculous. And I remember realizing that I had about probably like $4,200 worth of bills left. And I remember early on I had told my client, Matt, I said, Matt, I got all these bills. I'm just floored by how much I owe, and not expecting Matt to give me money. He's a very smart financial man. I was thinking maybe he could tell me what to do, And so the next day I came in after, getting this clearance from the guy saying that all my bills are written off. Matt is standing there, and I'm getting ready to train him, and he hands me an envelope. And he says, here, and I open it up, and it's a check. And it's a check for, I think it was like $3,200. And I looked at it, I said, Matt, what's this? You don't owe me, your sessions aren't up yet. And he says, John, I've been thinking about it. I said, I understand what you're going through, and I know this is far from what you owe, but hopefully it can help you and ease your mind a little bit. And I was just taken back. So now I probably owe at this point, I think it was like $800 I owed. And at the time, I had this printing job. And I remember just like talking to myself. Again, I didn't believe in God at this point. And I was like, how am I going to pay this last part of the bill? This $800. It's all I got left. And so it's a miracle to me already that I've had all these bills taken care of. And so I went home and I got an email. And at the time, I was selling commercial printing. And the gas company was one of my clients. And they printed the same thing every month. They knew how much I was getting. And the gas company called me and said, hey, you know what? This month, we're going to run an extra feature and an extra insert into the bill. And this is the specs for it. And I sent the specs in, and I always put the same commission on. And when they came back, my commission was exactly what was remaining on the bill I owed for the hospital. So Matt had paid me that money. I got commission extra that paid for the remaining bills, and the doctor had written them all off. So I had no bills from this. So to me, that was a complete miracle. But how do as a believer, I just thought, wow, I got lucky. This is a coincidence, but I know it was God looking after me and saying, I'm here, believe in me, I'm here, believe in me, And then after that, I started a miracle book because all these things started happening. I started getting kind of, wow, this is kind of weird, Mm-hmm. And I started writing things down, and a lot of people would look at them and make fun of them. I had a friend make fun of me once about one of them, I think you remember. And it's when you look at it, as an outsider, it's dumb to you. You think, oh, that's such garbage. But when you look at my journey and what had happened to me, you know that it's not a lie, that it's God showing himself in small little ways.
I know you're a very logical person. And so when those things were happening and God was just providing, I felt awful because I was the reason why this mess began. And so, of course, I'm praying for stuff to happen. And God's answering, and I'm like, wow, what are the this is 100% God.
Right.
But I felt like he was defying your logic with this because it just made no sense. It came out of the blue, and it was everything was accounted for.
Right.
That what the enemy meant for evil, God turned it around and turned it into a miracle that proved he was real. Because you had a lot of doubt still at that point, and God still provided for you. So, and what I love about our testimony is that God is not just rewarding good people. I was a stripper. I prayed for you, and you're an amazing guy, and you're an answer to prayer. And here you weren't even living for God. You were asking God for a miracle to provide for you. And he didn't say, I'm going to wait for you to start going to church, John. I'm going to wait for you to stop swearing. He blessed you. You reached out to him in complete humility and desperation. And I think that to me is a big testimony too, of encouragement for people who are like, I'm not a good person. I don't go to church. Why would God answer my prayers? Well, why don't you give God a try? I mean, a real honest try. Yeah. Like John was completely desperate. He couldn't even rely on logic anymore. He only could turn to God.
Yeah.
So anyway, I wanted to say, what's your passion now that everything has changed and you've become a believer?
I think because I was a science guy, really heavily got involved in the apologetics aspect. I really started to try to find answers to the questions that I had, because I had a lot of them, And I think my passion is finding answers for people that are non-believers, and trying to get them to become skeptics and not cynics, because there's a big difference, They're both going to ask the same question, but one of them is going to look for an answer they want to hear, and the other one's going to look for the truth.
Ah, that's good.
Right? And so I really... How I kind of weed out the skeptics is I listened to a guy called Frank Turk, and Frank had a great way to do it. And you can always tell when someone's a cynic. And the question you ask, and I would ask, is I would say, listen, I know that you don't believe in Jesus or any of that, but if you were to find out that Jesus existed through science, through everything that you believe is the reason that he would exist, would you become a Christian? And if they say no, I know there's nothing I can say. There's nothing I can tell them that's going to change their mind. They've already made it up. Sure. So it's a cynic I'm talking to, and it's almost pointless in a way. But I had a list of questions I would ask them and run them through. Instead of telling them, I'd try to make them listen to their own opinions and why they have them.
Their own logic.
Yeah.
So yeah, we actually started a little playlist of answering the cynics or skeptics or whatever, and nobody has asked any questions, but just invite our audience here to...
Yeah. I mean, if you guys have questions regarding the existence of God or why God does certain things, just feel free to post it in one of the comments here in the video.
Yeah.
And Julia will, send them over to me, and I'll answer them as best as I can. So.
Yeah. Great. So what advice do you have for those that are searching for God? If you were going to talk to, like, let's say your younger self, when you were in the world, in pornography, dating all these women, drinking and doing what you want, can a person like that be reached? And what would you say to them?
Well, I think the reason people always, one of the questions people ask all the time is, if God was real, why is there so much evil and so much strife in the world? Why does bad things happen to good people? And I say, well, it happens to bad people too, but a lot of times this chaos and this strife is what moves us closer to God. Look at my life. What happened to me, it was chaotic. And that was the only way I was going to find God. If life was perfect for me, I would have kept going the same way I was going. So when I look at, advice to people is, I think when you look at, tragedy and calamity, it's a way to move us closer to God, to get us to ask for his help and his guidance and have a relationship with him. One of the things I always believe in is that Jesus didn't come down to start a religion. He came down to repair a relationship. And he came down to repair that relationship with the Jewish people. And even Paul says in his word that to the Jew first and then the Gentile. So it's about a relationship, and God wants you to come to him for help. And that's what we need to do when we're having hard times. Because if life is perfect, we're all like spoiled little kids. We're going to whine and cry, and that's not the way it is. You really learn to appreciate your life. Now I appreciate my life so much because it was taken away from me. Yeah. And so when you lose something in life, if you don't get anything out of it, if you don't try to, number one, change your own beliefs and your own habits or help others, you've got nothing out of that strife. And strife and all these things, there's always something to learn in it that's going to make us better. And so that's the way I kind of look at it. So as a person, what advice do I have for non-believers? I say, search for the truth. And God even says in his word, if you search for me with all your heart and all your soul, you'll find me. And that's what I did. I was searching. Yeah. And I found him.
Yeah, that's amazing. So what's the most fulfilling thing about being a believer?
Well, I think for me, it's kind of funny. I originally got into health and fitness because I live a really healthy life, as you know, and you do too. I was always really afraid of dying. It just really scared me. I had a really good friend. My best friend, actually, when I was like 12 years old, was shot and killed. He was in his backyard grilling, and he got shot in the neck by a neighbor cleaning his gun, didn't know there was a bullet in there, and it killed him. And it affected me profoundly, because when I went to his funeral, I'm looking at my 12-year-old buddy laying in a casket, and I could see stitches. His head was so swollen, his mouth was stitched up, his eyes were stitched closed. And I remember all of us sitting and crying and looking at this kid in the casket. And I realized at that point, at that young age, wow, my friend is gone. This could happen to me. This could happen to anybody. Because when you're little, mom, dad, they're there for everything. But that wasn't the case. So I was so afraid of dying. And so I really did everything I could. I became paranoid of doing a lot of things, not getting hurt, not getting killed. And I just became so into health and working out. And I think, as I got older, I think the biggest thing for me with religion, and I don't even want to say religion, I want to say relationship. My relationship with God and Jesus is I don't fear death anymore. To me right now, working out is and eating good makes my life better because I feel better. I don't have to chase pain anymore because pain isn't there as much as it used to be, because now I eat completely good. I mean, I cheated a little bit here and before, but I figured things out. And so now I chase the good feeling as opposed to living, and not dying.
In fear
of dying. In fear of dying, because I had this constant fear of dying. I was a hypochondriac. I'd run to the doctor for anything. All my friends can tell you what I was like, I knew it was coming. Oh, here comes, I was called the guy from Gulliver's Travel, glum, because I always, oh man, that's going to turn into this, and everyone would laugh, But I just don't feel that way anymore. And I think that's the biggest thing, other than the fact I just, I don't know, I really enjoy each day. I get up in the morning and I leave the house, and I love our house. I love our life. And I just thank God as I'm driving by looking at the house, for you, for the house, and everything that we have.
So what advice do you have for non-believers?
I think it's just, chase the truth.
Okay.
I really can't stress that enough. Don't be that cynic and find your truth. Because when somebody tells you to find your truth, it's usually about your feelings, Like this woke culture, everything offends. So God's going to offend you even more, And we all define, good person according to our beliefs, not what God's belief is. And that's why a lot of us don't want to believe in God, Everyone's offended these days, and God is offensive.
So do you have any words of encouragement for believers who are struggling in their faith right now?
Surround yourself with fellow believers, and ask them to pray for you. Ask them to give you guidance. The big thing for me was, I just kept pursuing. It was funny is I actually tried to believe that God didn't exist, and I would listen to the atheists, and they're all their reasons, and I go, yeah, that sounds good. And all of a sudden I go, okay, I have to listen to the Christian side, and I would listen to the Christian side, and I go, holy cow, that sounds actually more true. So it was like I was searching, and it wasn't like I was following one belief all the time because I had confirmation bias, and that's the direction I wanted to go. I was listening to both sides. I was like I was a policeman. When I was a policeman, I didn't go to a crime scene and say, okay, this guy sounds like he's right. I don't want to hear your side of the story, right? Because this guy, I like what he has to say. Mm-hmm. And you can't do that in life, That's being cynical. That's being someone with confirmation bias. You have to search for the truth, and the truth is listening to both sides and having an open mind to not only Christians, but also non-believers. Let's face it, we all come to a belief based on our experiences. So you have to give yourself experiences from another person's point of view. And just because you haven't experienced something doesn't mean that person's experiences are wrong. So I just got to say to non-believers or believers is surround yourself with fellow believers to, number one, encourage you, increase your faith. And then if there's something that's causing you not to believe, find out what that is and why. Why is that causing you not to believe? And then see what a pastor has to say, an apologetics person has to say. And I really like quite a few of them. There's a guy named, like I said, Frank Turk I listen to. He's really, really good. I like William Lane Craig is really, really good. So there's a lot of them out there you can turn to that really have researched all this stuff, including, the science and all. And there's another guy named William Warner Wallace, and he's an ex-police officer from Los Angeles, and he approached it the same way I did, as he looked at the Bible as a detective. And he has researched so many things. You can go on his site, Cold Case Christianity, I believe, and see all his stuff. So
okay, thank you. So I know that you wrote a book. You had your journey of faith, and it compelled you to write a witnessing tool. Can you share that?
Yeah, so, trying to tell your friends once you become a believer to read the Bible is like, what? And you give them this book that's 66 books all contained into one that is very dry reading in the beginning, especially Leviticus, and this person begot that person. And I just said, man, how can I present the Gospels in a way that's interesting, short, and will give them a good overview of what Christianity is? And I put a book together with a brief introduction of my life, how I became a believer. And then I put 3 books of the Bible in there, John, Acts, and Romans. And John is basically the words of Jesus. Acts is introducing the apostles, the resurrection, and the apostle Paul. And then Romans is basically the creed of a Christian. So it gives you a really good understanding of Jesus, his life, his ministry, and what a Christian believes, and what happened, the story of Jesus. And then I put a little brief conclusion in there on how to go about, increasing your faith or finding out more about your faith. And the book I have is called the Trinity Bible, because there's 3 books of the Bible in there. Christianity is based on the Trinity, the Father, Son, and Holy Ghost. And so I just thought it was a kind of a good catch-all for it.
Well, you also explained too about the difference between Christianity, Judaism, and Islam, which a lot of people think it's all the same. They just group it together. So you give a brief overview of why Christianity is different and how it's different. And I think that's a really important witnessing tool.
Yeah, so I mean, for me with Islam, I just thought it was as strange as this. Muhammad was so different. He was so angry at one point, and then he wasn't angry, and I just didn't like the fact that you have to kill everyone else that is a non-believer or infidel. And I would confront my dad with that. And one of things my dad constantly always said is, there is only one God. There is only one God. And the misconception a lot of Muslims have is that Christianity's three gods. And he's really not. You know, that Jesus is mentioned more and held in just as high regard in the Quran as Muhammad. And I just thought that was bizarre to me that you could lift this guy up who you want to kill all his followers, but you say he's a great leader and he was a prophet. So it's so contradictory. And plus, Muhammad had no miracles. He created nothing. He just, said all these little, kind of parables and stories and quotes. And I just would say to my dad, Christianity isn't three gods. What do you mean? And he'd say, well, how can you have? And I would try to explain the Holy Spirit and, God and Jesus, and he just doesn't understand. But my dad was an engineer, and I said to him one day, I said, Dad, he says, how can God be three in one? I said, okay, what is ice? And he said, ice is water. I said, what's steam? And he said, well, steam is water. I said, what is liquid? Water, right? And he said, yeah. And I said, isn't that three forms of water? But it comes in three different forms. And him being an engineer, he understood, and he just kind of looked at me and smiled and didn't say anything anymore. But I just think that it's just kind of funny how God says, I am living water, drink me and so forth. But I think with pantheism, it's like everything's God, and that makes no sense. How could, your shoe or your cup be a God? And, there's other ones, Zoroastrianism, but then Judaism. I looked at Judaism, and the thing that separates Christianity from Judaism is they're one and the same. The thing is that Jews just don't believe in Jesus, but the Christians believe in everything in the Old Testament. Mm-hmm. And when you look at Judaism, if you ask most Jews, you're better off becoming a Muslim than you are Christian. And I got to say to myself, why is it so horrible for a Jew to become a Christian? And I look back in the Bible, and the same thing happened to Jesus. The Pharisees hated him so much because he constantly called them out. He was always pointing out their hypocrisy, their lies, and how they were misleading the Jewish people, and how they were thieves, basically. And they hated him for that. And so that's the main thing. The thing that really is compelling is the prophecies that Jesus fulfilled. And that's how you know, as a Christian, that Christianity and Christ is real, is just the Bible prophecy in of itself and the resurrection. And there's eyewitnesses to the resurrection with their statements being alive, 3,000 of them alive when that Bible was written. So it's not like hundreds and thousands of years like most people think, And so that's really what separates those religions from Christianity.
And prophecy is happening as we speak right now.
Right.
We are watching the news, and we as believers, as Christians, even though the news doesn't look good, we have a certain security in our faith, where the whole world is reading and seeing the news and going into panic and fear.
Right.
But we have an understanding of the times that we're living in.
Right.
Hey, everyone. Thank you so much for spending time with us and listening to John's whole story. And we will be with you in the comments below. So chat with us. After we watch this whole thing, we will be hanging out for an hour in the chat. So chat with us, and we love to hear what you think. And if you have any questions for John, because he's going to be doing his Answering the Skeptics playlist. So he'll be making videos for anyone who has any questions. Thank you so much, and we will see you soon. Bye.
Bye-bye.